Hey there, and welcome to the Visibility for Female Founders podcast. I'm your host, Ika Lucas, and this podcast is for you. If you're an impact driven founder, coach, or consultant who wants to find your own voice to speak, present, and amplify your message online, we explore how to get past the visibility roadblocks and grow your capacity to be seen so you can attract and chase your perfect audience while staying connected to the most important things by building a business that works around your life. The first thing that I will say is that the challenges faced by women are many and varied, as we know already. As females, we have added pressures and unique challenges that represent themselves in ways that our male counterparts just don't. And so when it comes to our own little businesses and being a female founder, what I have come to realize is that in my everyday life, I've seen double standards take place for publishing my voice and as a result being cancelled for that. There is also the tie and the fracturedness between the professional and the personal self. And I know that there's a lot of people who be here wondering, well, I've got my business, and do I represent myself as my business, or do I represent myself as my own voice, as a person who is building their personal brand, so to speak? And then there is also the fear of cancel culture. So as you get more prolific in sharing your voice, as you get more prolific in putting yourself out there, you actually do open yourself up to a lot more criticism, a lot more backlash, and a lot of misinterpretation, as well as you can end up feeling isolated because of the fear from some people that they, by associating with you, they may somehow be tarred by the same brush. Or it could be also that they fear that a lot of people I've worked with have, which is, who does she think she is? Putting herself out there, what point does she really want to prove? And so there is this quiet dialogue that goes on in our own minds as female founders, which can really put additional pressure on why being our authentic self is hard especially as a female founder. So I'm going to really break down the first 3 points. And then what I'm going to be doing is I'm going into why authenticity still matters if you are a female founder and you are wanting to put your authentic voice out there. And then I'm going to be giving you some practical tips on and ways in which you can protect your voice as well as show up authentically. And lastly, I'm going to be covering off on some practical ways in which you can not only protect your voice, but also show up authentically whilst inching your way forward towards a life in the visibility fast lane, as I like to call it. And so first things first, I really feel like I need to address this point head on because this is something that I have experienced in my professional life quite recently, where I shared something that was about giving context to a specific situation that needed to be explained in more detail. And instead of being applauded for my initiative, what ended up happening instead was that I was given personal kind of feedback, which was more intimating towards my lack of professional expertise, despite the fact that I belong in that specific profession. And so this is the way in which, these are some of the ways in which snide remarks and subtle put downs can really get in the way of you being able to actually express your authentic voice in the way in which you know best how to do, given that you have been given the baton or the permission to speak or represent yourself as being a member of a profession on which you are speaking on behalf of. So I want to really discuss the first point, which is double standards in my own lived experience, and then I'm going to give you some facts about a study that was published by the Oxford University Press on publishing while female, which is, are women held to higher standards? And there is some evidence from some peer review. It was published on the 16th of May, 2022. It is the Economic Journal and the publisher is the Oxford University Press. So I will be sharing a little bit of that. But before I delve into giving you a little bit of insight into what the findings are, this is real life stuff that's actually happening. And the real life stuff that's happening really is the fact that after I shared that, I was then essentially wrapped on the knuckles, not literally, but figuratively, to say that I didn't have the authority to speak about that and provide additional information from my expertise or my point of view, despite belonging to the group that has that expertise. And so therefore, by being part of that professional group, I automatically have the expert view coming from a personal perspective that I can offer to provide more context, given that I'm already part of that professional setting. So if I take even that into account and the way in which that made me feel, which was actually really to rule by fear and cancel my voice. And it took me a really long time to get over how I was treated. It really did help solidify the reason why I do what I do, is because this is happening in real life. This is not happening behind the scenes. This is happening as I speak. And so there are double standards. So the comment that I want to make is that in that specific instance, the feedback, the verbal feedback that I got was done in a way to actually undermine my confidence. So, if you think about that, and in relation to the study that was published that I just mentioned earlier by the Oxford University Press, this study that was published back in 2022, and it's in the links in the show notes if you're interested in reading more about this, is that women are, in plain words, women are held to a higher standard with everything that we do. So if in my situation, if it had been a male writing the same thing, it would have carried a lot more weight than me writing it, which clearly did not carry as much weight. And there are many different reasons for that, which I won't delve into. And it really does come down to visibility. It comes down to being seen as being strong. It really comes down to being seen as having a voice which could potentially threaten. And it really comes down to all of those micro moments of ego that need to be appeased. And in order to appease, you can end up losing your authentic voice if you're not careful. And if you haven't made the time to process and work through that, just like I have done in this particular instance, and it has taken a huge amount of strength and courage on my part to keep going despite having that backlash, and it's not easy. And so I don't say this out of a theoretical framework alone, operating from a place where, I'm just saying, yes, do it. Yes, do it. However, in doing it, you will be opening yourself up to criticism, and you will be opening yourself up to backlash, and you will be opening yourself up to misinterpretation in what I just mentioned earlier, which is when you do project and want to be your authentic self, you will be pulled back to the place where someone wants you to be, exactly where they want you to be, rather than where you want to be. And so it really does bring to light the injustices that are omnipresent around us, which lead to the rationale and the reasoning behind why it's so difficult to be your authentic self, because there are double standards for women. So coming back to the study, I'm going to be reading something out of this particular, the Economic Journal, which is written by Erin Hengel, and the topic is Publishing While Female, Are Women Held to Higher Standards? It is an evidence from peer review from the Economic Journal, volume 132, issue 648, published in November of 2022. And so if you want to know more and read more about that, it is in the show notes below. But I'm going to read out some parts of the conclusion here, which is that most raw numerical counts suggest that women produce less than men. Female real estate agents list fewer homes. Female lawyers bill fewer hours. Female physicians see fewer patients. Female academics write fewer papers. When evaluated by narrowly defined quality measures, however, women often outperform. Houses listed by female real estate agents sell for higher prices. Female lawyers make fewer ethical violations. Patients treated by female physicians are less likely to die or be readmitted to hospital. And as I argue in this paper, female economists surpass men on another dimension, which is writing clarity. Abstracts written by women are 1 to 6% more readable than similar abstracts by men, and they also become 2 to 5% more readable while under review when referees are not blinded to authors' identities. However, and this is the bit that really stings, is that the cost to women of revising their papers appears to be much higher than the cost to men. Female-authored papers spend 3 to 6 months longer under review compared to observably equivalent male-authored papers. Finally, it does not appear that women are rewarded for their better writing. Recent evidence from a set of comparable journals suggests that female-authored papers are accepted at lower rates, conditional on quality. Now, while this is set within the context of an academic setting, it really does bring to light the fact that essentially women are judged at a higher level for doing the same job. And so when you come back to showing up authentically, it really does, the double standards do play a part. And I really just wanted to bring this to life by citing an actual study that has been done in this space versus the actual day-to-day reality of my own lived experience, and to showcase how these two things are happening side by side in the same circumstance. It may not be in my situation, it may not be an academic article that I was writing, but actually expressing my point of view from being an expert that belongs to a specific profession, and yet being asked to hold back and not share something that was the most basic information, versus the double standard that would have happened had it been somebody else. Now, I've got additional layers to my identity that intersect, and that intersection really is about the fact that I'm not just female, but I am a brown female. I'm not just a brown female, but I'm a brown female from a subcontinent that has a lot of backlash in many different places across the world. And so I move forward with knowing that my identity is very much multidimensional, because there are parts to myself that are, and really going into the next discussion, which is the parts discussion, which is not only your professional and your personal identity, but in your situation, whichever walk of life you might be coming from, there might be parts to yourself that are multidimensional in the same way as belonging to an in-group or an out-group. So what I mean by that is, there are times in my life when I felt like I wanted to be the nurturer. There are times in my life when I feel strongly like I want to be the entrepreneur. There are times in my life where I want to be the mission-driven, purpose-driven person who wants to fight for a cause. There are times in my life where I'm conflicted by being a mum and a wife and the many other roles that I play with the passion that I want to pursue. And so I feel as though women have a lot to carry in this as female founders when they are putting themselves online. Quite often it comes to us with balancing those competing priorities, whatever they might be in our life. The third point that I do want to point out is that you see a lot of women who already have a voice. They're publishing, they're saying things that they want to say, they're showing up, they're doing all of those things. But that's not to say that it doesn't come with its fair share of pound of flesh. It comes with opening yourself up to backlash. It does come with isolation. It comes with having to sometimes defend yourself. And in the quiet ways in which some of those backlashes, they don't always have to be trolls on social media. Some of those can actually be in personal put downs and snide remarks. So those are all of the things that we as women have to take into account as we are putting our authentic selves out there. But it always comes back down to, and I always circle back to, well, why is this important? And it's really important because at the end of the day, you cannot build a business at the end of a cul-de-sac. You have to, and when I mean a cul-de-sac, for those of you who might be outside of the Australasian area, it really means at the end of a street, in the quiet end of the street, where no one's going to find you. And so it really comes down to three things. One is trust, the other is resonance, and the third one is resilience. And the first one being that if content is king, then context is the crown. And so I just now want to talk about why, despite having heard all of the challenges, still matters. And the reason being that it's a three-step process that I mentioned earlier, which is trust, resonance, and resilience. Really, it comes down to the fact that as female founders, we are looking for our clients and customers to be able to trust us. And now, trust is born in two different ways. Trust is born from whether someone feels that the message and the way you are articulating what it is that you want to say. So, everything that's in your head that you can then express into either the words that you use, whether that be on video, whether that be in a written format, are words that are actually going to resonate with the people that you are looking to come to you and for them to actually be able to work with you. And so that requires a certain degree of trust in your voice, not only in your own voice, but also trust that is born out of, firstly, if you're showing up organically, is that trust based on how you show up consistently? And that consistency is whether or not you show up based on how you feel about showing up in the first place, or it's linked to how you feel day by day. So, for example, if you don't feel like showing up on one day because you've got things going on and life takes over, then obviously that can end up breaking the chain of consistency. One day goes into two, two goes into three, 5, 7, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and before you know it, you've actually lost momentum. And I'm sure that for some of you listening in, this will sound like, yep, that's me. And the reason I say that is because that has exactly been me. Is that even though I want to show up, there are equities and inequities in my life that I have to balance, which really does play into whether or not I can show up in the way I really want to. And so the link that I really want to make here is that your emotional state will really reflect on how you show up and why really you need a level of consistency, coaching, and guidance to actually keep you accountable through the what I call the visibility journey towards inching towards the visibility fast lane, whether that be showing up more consistently organically, or whether you are creating a content bank to then eventually go in and create video assets so that people can then start hearing your voice in multiple places, and so that you're omnipresent in their environment and your voice becomes the trusted voice as a result of you building trust in your own voice, you being able to articulate your message in a way that needs to be heard, taking into account the equities and inequities in your life that may be playing a part based on all of the things that I've shared already. And so that trust is what's actually going to help bring you more clients, bring you more leads, bring you more inquiries, increase your attraction, increase your magnetism, and help you go from a state of being in fear to being in flow and ease. And that comes with knowing that there is discomfort to be had by sharing the voice, despite all of the roadblocks and challenges that I've actually mentioned in this episode already. And so if I think about that in relation to my second point, which is resonance, and I know that there is a lot of AI slop out there. You can create content with AI. Absolutely. If that's you, then go for your life. But really, what it really comes down to, which is the point I made earlier, which is if content is king, then context is the crown, which is that the cherry on top that's now going to make a difference between you and somebody else who does the same thing as you is actually going to be the way in which you frame what it is that you do. And how you frame what it is that you do is actually dependent not only on how you describe what you do, which is different to, say, somebody else offering the same thing, but also in the consistency in which how you show up that is not necessarily reliant entirely on your emotional state. So that's the second takeaway for you on really leaning into embracing that authentic voice and the reason why your voice still matters despite knowing the challenges that are omnipresent all around us. The third one being resilience. I think the more we own our voice, the more we talk about what we do, the more we stand up and speak up for the things that we believe in and share our point of view despite feeling like we might be cancelled. It actually does help you to withstand criticism and build resilience in yourself. And really being able to back yourself as a female founder, really back your business as well. So, the next thing that I'm going to be sharing is how you might be able to move forward despite the fact that you have all of these things at play. I'm going to be sharing the 5 ways in which you can not only protect your voice and also show up authentically. So, the first one being anchoring in your values. And I know this gets used or overused quite a lot, but it's really what keeps you grounded when fear arises. It's really knowing what you're standing for, what things are you going to keep on doing despite all of that. What's keeping you sad? If there are things in your life that are making you sad, you only really have to look internally and check out what your real values are. And I put values down as a deck of cards. At any one point, you're dealt a hand from the deck of cards or a set of values that you have. And the 3 to 4 values that are in operation are usually more omnipresent at certain times in your life, which is to say that the hand that you get dealt with for your values gets swapped around based on the season of your life and what's most important to you at that time. And for me, it really has been a connection that has been lacking in my life for a really long time. And so the steps and the measures that I will take is intentionally building and opening myself up to more connection as a way of living out my values. And when I start doing that on a regular basis, I start to see that my sadness will start to decrease because I'm actually playing into and my values are in action rather than just static and theoretical. So that is the one thing. And if you're interested in knowing how you can find your true voice, which is very deeply aligned with your deck of cards or values in operation or what you're optimizing towards, then send me a message. I would love to hear from you. You can either reach out to me at Ika Lucas on LinkedIn, or you can reach out to me on @contenthalo on Instagram, and I would love to hear from you to even understand what your values might be and how this visibility journey could help you. So that's one. The second one is practice internal visibility. What I mean by internal visibility is that you can have private journals. I have stacks of journals that I write all my thoughts in. I have a journal on my phone. I have a written journal because there are times when I just want to type away if I'm away from my physical book. And then there are times when I just want to write about things. Maybe it's early on a Saturday morning, early on a Sunday morning. I'm an early riser. That works for me. Do what's best for you, but private voice notes to yourself, private journals, practicing internal visibility is a really huge and will be a really huge benefit to you as you're navigating this road towards visibility in the fast lane, as I like to call it. And then share with clarity rather than urgency. I know that there's a lot of pressure out there to be consistent, show up. There are times and seasons in your life where not being overtly visible is actually a good thing because you are being visible to yourself. And when I talk about being visible to yourself, it's about putting self-care and self-love practices in place where something feels misaligned. You really got to breathe life into it and give enough time for it to work its way through before you can embrace visibility in the fast lane. The fourth one is really own your humanity. I feel like a lot of the women I work with in particular put a lot of pressure on themselves to do the right thing. They're often people who have either been in private practice, have their own flourishing business, and have had to do quite a lot of giving away a lot of themselves to get to where they got to, and then have come to the realization that actually they've given too much away of themselves in a bit, and now they're in a bit to reclaim some of that. And if that's you listening in today, it's just know that it's okay for you to be human. It's okay to be vulnerable, and for you to be able to process your inner narrative in a way that actually helps you become more visible by having a low visibility technique, which is really embracing your inner voice first before you project anything out to the outside world. So if you're curious about that, have a look at the links in my show notes. There's you can head to contenthalo.com/story to get your how to share your story without oversharing guide, which actually runs you through how you can resolve that inner narrative that you have for yourself. The second thing and the last thing I want to say is that really focus on building a reputation rather than just leaning on recognition. And I want to quantify that within the social media space by saying that if you're on social media, there will be a pressure on you to post in a way that actually earns you more likes and comments. And while that's fine, you need to do that every once in a while. It's actually not a bad thing to do. Virality is not a bad thing by any means, but don't optimize for that out of the gate if you are still coming to terms with how to be visible. You can't go from being 0 to 100 or 200 miles or kilometers an hour if you're just starting out. For instance, you're going to have to work through the journey of getting to where you are, to where you want to be, by taking the steps and measures that you need to close that authenticity gap that you might have for yourself, because you might feel 100% authentic to you and you're already living out your values naturally, but perhaps you just don't know how to amplify them. But in doing so, if you've got a steep learning curve, you've got to allow for that steep learning curve to actually happen first before you get into amplification, so you don't end up in the same cycle that you were trying to escape in the first place. So I hope that you have enjoyed this episode as much as I have enjoyed creating it. If you have loved getting the insights, I would love it if you could leave me a review for this. And I would also love to hear from you if you have any thoughts about this episode, what you thought about it, whether you enjoyed it. Send me a note on @ContentHalo, and I would love to be able to send you a guide where you can amplify your voice and go further. With that being said, thanks very much, and I'll see you in the next episode.